back to the show. Now, the moment you guys have been waiting for, I promise you guys I will give you a full-out Luke Cage review, and it's about to go down right now. Hell yeah, sweet Christmas. So, my thoughts and opinions on Luke Cage. So, right off the bat, I'm going to tell you right now that I watched the show twice within the last 2 weeks, and it is easily my favorite show that I've seen on Netflix. I've seen a lot of good shows on Netflix. Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Marco Polo. I really like that show a lot as well. There's definitely been a lot of good series that I've caught off of Netflix, most of them Netflix originals and what have you. And this one is definitely my favorite. I'm being totally subjective when I say that because it involves so many different aspects that I hold near and dear in my everyday life. So, for example, hip-hop, sports, basketball in particular when they were talking about that. Literature, from time to time I like to indulge into a good autobiography basically, and they kind of gave me some ideas on which ones I should look out for in the future. I like talking about social issues that are happening in society today, especially ones that pertain to race basically. They talk a whole lot about all those things, and of course the superhero genre on television and film. You know, it was everything wrapped up into one, and I've never really seen a TV show, at the very least, that had all those elements that I hold near and dear to my heart, and they gave me that, and they gave me that in the most purest form, and I appreciate the good folks at Marvel and Netflix for making that happen. Definitely, it's one of the best series I've ever watched, but it's definitely my favorite thus far. Now, here are the things that are very good about this show. And just so y'all know, there are no spoilers. I'm not going to give you guys any spoilers, because I'm sure I have listeners right now who have yet to watch this, so I'm not going to spoil it for them, but I'm just going to point out some of the themes that they will expect to see in this series. As we all know, the show takes place in Harlem. Harlem is a predominantly black neighborhood, also Hispanic neighborhood as well. So there are a lot of themes that kind of deal with those things, basically. One of the themes that I like that they deal with are themes that pertain to race and socioeconomic status and all those things. I'll get to that later. But let me get to the core of it basically. You got Luke Cage, superhero, power man, hero for hire. That's the original name of said character. Basically, the whole premise of him is the fact that he was once framed by an associate of his. I'll leave that for later on, basically, for you guys to watch at least. He was framed by an associate and was sent to a place called Seagate Prison, which is kind of like the Rikers Island of the Marvel Universe, basically. So he got sent there, and that's where he got his powers. A doctor, put him in an experiment when his life was literally on the line, and basically something went awry in that experiment, and then he came out with the special abilities. Special abilities include super healing, kind of like Wolverine basically, impenetrable skin, kind of like the Incredible Hulk, and then enhanced strength, so like the Hulk and Captain America. And so basically with that, the nickname Power Man was given to him as well. So this guy can bust through walls, and he's basically bulletproof, all right? He is bulletproof. Nothing can penetrate his skin. I'll leave that at that. But yeah, nothing modern, I should say, can penetrate his skin. So that is the premise of his special abilities. Now, Luke Cage is not your typical hero. He isn't someone who accepts the title of a hero like a Batman or a Superman. This is someone who wants to be treated like a normal, regular, everyday citizen of society. But the more and more he gets himself into situations that call for his supernatural abilities, the more he gets brought into the light, so to speak, of being a hero for the people who depend on him. What I like about Luke Cage is the fact that he doesn't wear a mask. He doesn't wear a mask because it shows that he is a part of the community. He is a part of the people. And it's good for him in particular because he's what they call a street-level superhero, essentially. So kind of like in the same vein as Daredevil and Jessica Jones, where they handle some of the baddies and the villains that are within their own sector. They're not really global heroes like a Captain America or a Black Panther, for example, which is perfectly fine. It ties well into the storyline nonetheless. So you have him, and then you also have characters who are surrounded around him for various reasons. You have Officer Misty Knight, who works for the NYPD, who is a detective, actually, not even an officer, but detective. In the comics, she has a bionic arm that she got from Stark Industries, and basically that gives her power. But I'll let you guys know off the bat that she doesn't have that ability in this season, so don't go looking for that. That's one spoiler I'll give you that probably wasn't even a spoiler to begin with, but it will hint at that some point during the season. I'll let you feast on that. And then you have the character who is known as Cottonmouth. Now, he is portrayed to be as the protagonist of the series, somewhat similar to Wilson Fisk if you ever watched Daredevil, but definitely he is one of the main baddies of the series, and his character is very, very convictive. Once you watch the series, you're gonna say to yourself, "Wow, that guy right there is one of my favorites." He's definitely one of my favorites. He's arguably my favorite character of the series. But there's so many different characters that kind of ingratiate themselves within the series that kind of boost up the profile of the show as a whole. Now, here are the things that I like about this Luke Cage series. First of all, they deviated away from the original comic book for the most part, like in terms of the general themes, because the general theme of the Luke Cage comic book when it debuted in 1972, it tried to follow the trend of blaxploitation films that were being released at that time. Blaxploitation films are kind of like amplified stereotypes of black people, how, they may speak in jive, or, there's always some sort of theme that involves some sort of over perpetuated notion of what black people may do in pop culture. So they deviated away from that, and I'm glad it did, because it would have turned the series into more of like a parody, basically. But they do make nods at the original comic as well, in case if you are a fan or if you did your research prior to that. So that's why I appreciate about it as well. They always have a knack for hinting at the nostalgia of certain comic books and such. So what they did with this series is they ingratiated different themes within society today. So the biggest example of that, if you've ever watched the trailers and promos for it, you notice that Luke is wearing a hoodie, and he's getting shot repeatedly as he's wearing a hoodie. And for any of you guys who don't know or didn't really pick it up, it's basically a metaphor for the black man in America. The fact that if a black man is caught wearing a hoodie, he's bound to get shot and killed, aka Trayvon Martin. But the fact that he's bulletproof speaks volumes, because in the eyes of every racist in America, the biggest fear to them is a bulletproof black man. So I love the fact that they kind of hit that home without, trying to preach it to you. They also dive into the fact that there's so much systemic racism that happens within America as it pertains to law enforcement and people of color. So they address that issue as well in the most subtle way possible. They also talk about literature and certain black historians that are primarily within the Harlem universe, so to speak. So they speak about a gentleman by the name of Crispus Attucks, who was one of the first slaves to gain his freedom as he migrated up to New York and became a self-made man, basically. So they kind of dive into that a little bit as well, in which I appreciate, because it's not just a bang-bang shoot-'em-up type of series, but they also educate you in the process without having to force it into you. And then overall, I just love the fact that you are dealing with themes such as reluctancy. You're dealing with themes such as trust. You're dealing with themes such as, romance. And there's so many things that are ingratiated within the series that even the most casual of movie buffs or TV buffs will watch and say, hey, this is actually pretty good. Like, I love the fact that they drilled this point home and I can somehow relate to. And the fact that I love the most is there's such a huge hint of diversity in it that you can't really get anywhere else. Not only is the show diverse, but some people will have you believe that it isn't. Don't worry, I made another video about that, which I will be posting up very shortly. But the fact that not only this series, but with all the other series that Marvel has done for Netflix, so we're talking Jessica Jones, Daredevil, and upcoming in Iron Fist, the diversity is so raw and it's so real. So in Luke Cage, of course, you have a black man. Jessica Jones, you have a white woman. You have Iron Fist, white male, and then Daredevil, uniquely I should say, someone who's handicapped, he's blind. So you have a little bit of something for everything. And I love the fact that in each of these series, they deal with their own hardships. So, or they have like a central theme that is very prevalent from start to finish. So with Daredevil, for example, you have the justice system and how it's severely flawed. You have Jessica Jones that deals with PTSD and sexual assaults. And then you have Luke Cage that deals with the systemic racism that happens in America as it pertains to law enforcement versus the people themselves. Iron Fist hasn't come out yet, so we don't know what theme that they're going to deal with specifically. But I love the fact that all of these themes are very central to their characters nonetheless. I love that. And I think that's the thing that makes them so unique from the movies as well. The only thing that they don't have is a larger budget than the films. That way they can always add in the special CG effects and what have you. But that doesn't hamper the show in any way, shape, or form. This show is comparable to almost any crime drama, because that's certainly what it is, because there's a lot of involvement with the police and how they're doing investigations and what have you. So from when I'm watching the show, I'm not comparing it straight to these particular shows I'm going to mention, but there are certain elements that are very similar that they implement to these shows. So I see certain elements from The Wire, for example, and I may see certain elements from Power, for example. I see certain elements here and there. But the thing that I love about this show is the music and how they incorporate the music into certain themes of the show. So they don't just throw in music just to add to the ambiance or whatever. They add music to it to help tell the story of each episode as it comes along, and it follows through. So for example, and this is no spoiler as well, no spoiler at all, in the first episode, Cottonmouth, he owns a club called Harlem's Paradise, and every night he always has a live act. It could be R&B, it could be rap, it could be whatever. In the first act, he had well, I was going to say Raphael Sadiq, but technically Tony performing one of his hits. And the song that he was playing, or performing rather, tied into the central theme of that episode in particular. And this happens on a regular basis. I mean, there's even one performer, I can't remember his name, but he has a very James Brown-esque sound and vibe to him. And basically, as the song is playing, there's an action sequence that's happening with Luke Cage that ties into it. Also, speaking of which, there is a portion in this series where Luke Cage is fighting off a whole bunch of goons, and you have a song from the Wu-Tang Clan playing in the background. And it fits so perfectly. And when you hear this song, you're going to think to yourself, why did it take 20 plus years for them to use that song in a fight sequence? That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to spoil it for you guys. But yeah, I loved it. I loved every single moment of it, and I just love how it tied into every single episode, especially the last song that was performed on the final episode. I'm not going to say that either, but it fits well with the theme is all I'm trying to say. So they use music as an excellent storytelling device, which I appreciate the most. Overall, this is a very, very well played out series. There's a few things I didn't like about it, but then I think back and I'm saying to myself, I'm kind of nitpicking at that point. Because of course no show is perfect at all. But at the same time though, you're gonna find a few nooks and crannies that kind of make you scratch your head a little bit. But for the most part, this is a very enjoyable watch. I'd recommend it to anybody, especially if you're a hip-hop fan, especially if you're a music fan, especially if you're an action series fan, or if you're just a casual fan. Even then, that's fine. I've been recommending the series to so many people, even from people who I may look at and kind of stereotype in my head and say, yeah, you probably wouldn't be interested in that. But I think this is a show that everyone will enjoy. And despite what some critics may think, aka keyboard warriors, I feel as though if they can get past the fact that, you know, there are so many people of color in this show that they're not used to seeing, if they get past that and actually watch it for what it is, then they will definitely enjoy the series for what it is. I definitely do. I'm a little biased because I see people who look like me and they kind of go through similar hardships that I may not go through myself, but anyone who would look like me will, depending on what area they're in, basically. I'm from Canada, so a lot of the events that are happening in America don't necessarily happen in Canada on that frequent of a basis, but Black Canadians and just people of color in general, no matter in what type of diaspora you're in, go through systemic racism, and they talk about that in that series. So this is definitely a recommended watch from yours truly. I suggest you hop on your Netflix account and watch it. If you have someone else's IP address, use theirs. If you don't have Netflix, get it just so you can watch that. Or if you can find some other method to watch it, but I'm not going to judge, but go ahead and do it anyway, because it is that damn good of a series. Do you guys agree? you guys disagree, let me know. Hit me up on Twitter at GM_cool or cool_radio. Cool!